Hello, friends, and welcome to episode number 68 of Nostalgia Talk. I'm James, and today we have a very, very special guest. I am being joined by a children's television legend. There's that word legend again, but it's true. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, fans, everyone watching and listening, let's give a big welcome to the one and only Mitchell Kriegman.
Yay. Legend, isn't that like related to Indiana Jones? And that didn't do very well at the box office, did it? So
I
I
mean,
don't
I'm
know.
I will say this, I am looking forward to seeing the new Indiana Jones.
I
So,
want to see it. I want to see it. I admit I want to see it too. Yeah.
mhm.
Although I hear they used a lot of AI and a lot of CGI in the beginning of the movie to make him look like he was 30 years ago or however long ago it was.
Technology's a miracle, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Now, for
For better.
anybody who doesn't know, Mitchell is a writer and producer who has written and also created some of the most iconic children's shows of all time. He was a writer on Saturday Night Live, not really a children's show, but it's an iconic
No,
show at least.
right.
He wrote for Doug and Ren and Stimpy and created Clarissa Explains It All, The Book of Pooh, It's a Big, Big World, and of course, Bear in the Big Blue House. So,
Yes.
Mitchell, welcome to Nostalgia Talk.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
So let's begin with what did you aspire to want to become? Were you always interested in film?
Well, I mean, when I was a kid,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
I just wanted people to notice me.
that's fair.
I just wanted people to realize that I was different and treat me that way, honestly, because I was. And I wanted to be a writer, I think, for a long, long time. And I was making things up and creating things along, forever.
Hmm.
So, yeah, so I've always, and I didn't know whether it was going to be kids or adult or what it was going to be. I just wanted to do something, I wanted to create things.
Okay. So what was your first film job?
Oh, let's see. Um, what was my first film job? I didn't really have jobs. No one
Okay,
ever hired me.
it happens.
I kind of went right to creating because nobody would hire me. Um, so I didn't really have, I guess I did some things, but I had really weird jobs. Like I was a video artist to start and a performance artist. So that's not really a job, but that's what I did. And if you're that, then you're just doing things to pay the bills, So like I rang the bell for the Salvation Army one Christmas. I remember that. I used to write secretary manuals for AT&T, which included questions like how do you keep your pencil from rolling off the desk, which was my favorite. And I wrote really weird speeches for industry leaders, corporations. It was like they're called industrials or anything. So I just did anything I could do to make a buck. But meanwhile, I got grants to make video art and some grants to do performance, and I did that for a long time until I started being able to get work in the business.
Okay. So, like one of my past guests, his name is DJ McHale. I don't know if you know DJ, but he created the Nickelodeon show "Are You Afraid of the Dark?"
Oh yeah, I don't know him personally, but I know who he is. Yeah,
Okay, I met him last year at HalCon, and then about a week later, I reached out to him and I was like, "You want to come on my podcast?" And
yeah,
he knew me anyway, so he very happily accepted.
that's great.
And he was saying that writing was never really something that he imagined himself doing, but he was always creative. So much so that when it came to school projects, he would often do videos. Did you ever make little videos on your own growing up?
Well, I don't think there were videos. That's how old I am. I don't think. I mean, there were. I was a video artist, so I was in the group of people that made the first videos.
Mm-hmm.
They were all these very kind of funny, weird little videos I made. The kind of thing would be on YouTube today. Um,
So like
but
little skits.
yeah, I mean, they were performances. They were like I did a little piece about a guy um, whose family collected the jaws of deceased relatives. And I had a prop, which was I lived next door to a doll factory, and there were one day I came outside and there was a box of Jaws, doll Jaws, the lower part right here,
Yep.
and like a puppet sort of thing, doll jaw. And so I would just make stories up. I would just take it upstairs. I had gotten a video camera finally, and I just make up stories about these doll jaws. So it was like, this one belonged to my sister Louise. She had a cleft in her chin, and this is my uncle, whatever. Anyway, and I did other things. I did some funny stuff with my dog. I did the effect of gravity on dogs. And I did just weird little videos. And eventually, actually, which was, I guess, a break for me, Michael O'Donoghue from SNL, he had been Mr. Mike. He did Mr. Mike's Mondo Video. He put my early videos into Mr. Mike's Mondo Video and sort of discovered me. And so that was exciting. And then that did lead to SNL. He's the one that recommended me for SNL.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So how did you get to be a part of Nickelodeon?
Nickelodeon. So there were only a certain number of businesses in New York City at that time in this area. So there was Sesame Street, there was Broadway, and there was Nickelodeon. I mean, that was the business at that time. And a lot of people worked at all, and there were things like the National Lampoon and that kind of, parody stuff. So a lot of people, a lot of writers, very famous writers, really great writers, worked anywhere they could on all three. I mean, most of them didn't work in kids that much, but some did. And so I knew about Nickelodeon. Oh, the reason why I got in there was because I had a chance to I did a found footage show first, before that nobody ever sees anymore, but it was on before Clarissa. They weren't doing any original production. So I did something called, and now a word from our sponsor, which was just weird old TV commercials that went on.
Right.
They don't have commercials like that anymore. And then I was with a writer friend. We got a deal to write Nickelodeon's first sitcom. And then he went to Hollywood. He escaped to Hollywood, and he thought I would want to go with him, but I didn't. And so I stayed and took over the deal, and I created Clarissa.
So Clarissa was the first ever live action Nickelodeon sitcom?
Yeah.
I actually did not realize that, because like I aspired to want to get into film through live action Nickelodeon sitcoms. So it's interesting that it goes that far back, but I didn't realize that Clarissa was the first out of many of these.
And I think Salute Your Shorts was at the same time, but it was like we both did pilots at the same time, and then we both got on. And but that was the first live action show I did ever. Cool. I mean, I forgot. I also did a bunch of before the comedy. It's called the Comedy Channel now, right?
Comedy Central.
Comedy Central, right? It's called Comedy Central. I'm starting to sound like a daughtery kind of person, but Comedy Central. Before Comedy Central, there was something called the Comedy Channel, and I did like 8 episodes a week of 2 series there. One was Rachel Sweet, who had all these incredible writers on it, and she was really good. And then there was something called Higgins Boys and Gruber, and those are the guy. Higgins is the guy that went on to be Steve Higgins on The Tonight Show and SNL, and Dave Higgins is an actor. So I had done those shows before I did Clarissa.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Clarissa was the first one that you like created.
I did everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And for those of and for any of the listeners who don't know of the show Clarissa Explains It All, it was think like Lizzie McGuire, kind of like it had some.
It was before Lizzie McGuire,
right? Yeah, but I grew up in the Lizzie McGuire era.
Lizzie McGuire is like Clarissa, not the other way around.
fair enough. They are very similar.
Yeah, they're too similar, honestly. And the writer that created Lizzie McGuire took over a show I did, a CBS pilot for Clarissa, and so it was a little coincidental.
Oh,
Just saying.
that's funny. But for any of the listeners who have never heard of Clarissa Explains It All, it was actually the first show that launched Melissa Joan Hart into popularity. A lot of people mostly remember her for
Sabrina.
Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and I
Right.
absolutely love that show too.
Right,
But
right. Depends on which generation you're in. Yeah.
yeah, but Clarissa Explains It All, like, and I have watched it. Like, you can find clips of that show on YouTube if you want to check it
It's
out.
still it's still playing, actually. I think it's on I forget where it's on now. It was on Apple TV forever. I don't know
Oh.
where. Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
it's still on.
Okay, cool. I'll look for it on my Apple TV.
Yeah.
I do remember hearing that there were plans for a reboot of Clarissa
Yeah.
Explains It All. But I
Yeah.
recently read an interview with Melissa Joan Hart, and she said that
Yeah.
that's not happening anymore.
Well, that's what she says. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily true, I have to say. Oh, yeah.
So there's still plans for it?
Oh, it's still in the works. Yeah. It's still
Okay.
endlessly going on. But there was a point where we had a pilot that I wrote, and we were ready to go, and then everybody at the network got replaced, and then there's a very volatile world out there. But no, it's we'll have to wait and see. You never know till it's happening. But no, it's not.
Exactly.
It hasn't gone away.
Okay. And you also wrote a sequel book I read online.
Yeah.
That was, yeah. And I think that that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, she was all grown up in the novel. It was called Things I Can't Explain. It was the answer to everything that I never did in the original. So,
Maybe that's what we'll see a little bit of in the reboot.
I wish that was a whole new show and series, but no, it's yet another idea. I
Okay.
live in a Clarissa verse of ideas. So,
Mm. And of course,
yeah.
prior to Clarissa and everything with Nickelodeon, you did a little bit of writing for the Muppets. Like I read online that you did the Dial a Muppet
Yeah, I did
phone
Dial 'Em Up.
service. Yeah.
That was a highlight. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And also a couple of Sesame Street video games, letters and numbers.
I did the first interactive video disc, laser disc.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that was for Sesame Street, and I wrote the movie. And let's see, Elmo and Grouchland,
Right. Yeah.
that too. So,
Mm-hmm. But in all of that, like with the Dial of Muppets and the interactive video games, did you get to know Jim Henson at all?
no, not at all. I never met him,
Okay.
actually. But I met some of the people of the company, and that probably led to some degree to me doing Bear there at some point.
Okay. And you also wrote Mr. Willoughby's Christmas Tree.
Yes, these are all the weird things that I did. Yeah, I did Mr. Willoughby's with Robert Downey Jr.
I was just about to say, yeah,
How
for any of
weird
the
is that?
listeners who don't know, it's the Golden Avenger
Iron Man.
himself in a Christmas
Yeah. Iron Man. I wrote the first Iron Man Christmas special.
We should actually make that a thing, an Iron Man
That's
Christmas
good.
special.
Yeah, yeah.
I think my very best friend, whose name is Sean, she lives overseas. I think she would just love to see an Iron Man
There you
Christmas
go.
special.
Iron Man Christmas special.
But what was Robert Downey Jr. like? Did you get to know him at least
No,
a
I didn't
little?
get to know him, but I just wrote that series. And I was there on the set. He was on the set. I don't think that was his shining moment for his career.
I mean, he definitely started out as a teen idol, but I don't know if he
Yeah.
would ever, if I went up to Robert Downey Jr. and said, "Do you remember doing this Muppet Christmas special?" He probably would say yes, but he'd probably be like, "Honestly, that didn't make me a lot of money."
Yeah, I'm sure it did, but I don't even know if he'd say he remembers it at this point. Who knows?
That's very true. He's like a box office champ now.
Right. He's gone on to other things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it was actually one of the last things that John Stone did before he
Yes.
passed away.
He directed it. Yeah.
Yeah. Was he somebody that you got to know?
Yeah, I knew John Stone, and I worked with him. Yeah, he was a great guy.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Very smart man too.
Oh yeah, terrific.
Mm-hmm.
Great guy.
So how did Bear in the Big Blue House come about?
That's interesting. I had the idea when I was at Nickelodeon, actually, when I would see in the studio, because we built almost like all of Clarissa's house in the studio.
Right.
And I was fascinated by the idea that you could build a house inside a studio, and I just thought kids would love to run around a house, in a studio. And so my first idea was just to make a house because that would be great for kids. And I was going to make it sort of have talking furniture in it and all sorts of goofy things. Before Pee-wee, I was going to do that. And then it evolved into this idea of this bear because I think, well, first of all, I always told Henson that they should have their own Barney, that they shouldn't, let that go unanswered. And people were really irritated with Barney at that time. So I just thought that kids look at adults. I had three kids by that point. And I think kids look at adults as if they're big lumbering creatures, when you're little,
Yep.
And so, I just thought it would be a good series to really create something warm and with a lot of good information in it about, the way you get along and act with each other. And so that became Bear in the Big Blue House,
Mm-hmm. And so, like, you say that you like the idea of building a house in a studio.
Yeah.
Like, were all of the sets like connected, or would it be like, okay, we're gonna move here, we're gonna move here, we're gonna?
Yeah, they were actually. It was an amazing set. Cabot McMullen built the set, and he made a lot of. He designed a lot of my sets, and I still work with him. And it was, first of all, because it's a Muppet set, it had to be 4 feet off the ground.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so that it was like literally the entire stage was 4 feet off the ground, and it had a camera alley, so we could go up and down as if it were on the ground, but it were on these platforms. And then one side was, I guess, the living room, the kitchen, and the otter pond. And the other side was all the other sets, the bathroom and the bedroom and whatever. And so you could go, that's why we went through the wall. We would go through the wall from one set to the next, and Bear could dance through them. So it was an amazing set. It was just a phenomenal, piece of work. And especially when you get to things like the balcony where he sings goodbye with a good night with the moon. That was an amazing. Cabot did that. That was brilliant.
Yeah, I had a Noel on this show about 2 years ago, and to wrap up, without telling him, I said to him, "Noel, would you like to help me sing a goodbye song to close out?" He knew exactly where that was going, so we actually did a duet of the goodbye song.
Oh,
together.
You're so lucky. That's so great.
Yeah, like a lot of my friends were like, lucky. "How did that happen?"
Yeah,
I've known that guy for years. I guarantee you that if I had just started singing it, he probably just would have joined me anyway.
Oh, of course. He's such a great guy.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. But that's interesting about the set being that way, because like on the last show that I worked on, I was a set dresser.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
interesting for a set dresser because, he had to have bear sized stuff. Mm-hmm. Like the couch that he sat on was enormous because he was a huge character, Mm-hmm. And then when we made stuff, either it was crazy little stuff like all of Tutter's stuff, or it was big stuff for Bear. It was really interesting. The set people were amazing on that show.
Absolutely, yeah. So what are some of your favorite Bear in the Big Blue House songs?
Oh, there's so many.
There's so many. I put you totally on the spot.
Oh yeah, no, it's not a problem. I love, I wrote a lot of songs as well, so I like a lot of songs I wrote. Yeah, well, and I wrote them with Andrew Wyatt, who's actually an amazing musician, and does other work besides that. And there were so many good composers on that show, Brian Woodbury and Peter Lurie. And I wrote with all of them. I think I wrote with all of them. I wrote some of my own, but Brian wrote all these songs that were for Trilo that were just terrific and incredibly catchy. Even I think it's Billy Lopez, or is it Bobby Lopez? Bobby Lopez, who wrote Frozen, wrote some songs for us.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he met his wife on the set of Bear, and they wrote together. So, I liked all that. Like, I liked everything from the dancing with his blanket. I forget what that song was. I wrote No Harm with Andrew Wyatt, and I liked that one a lot. I'm only thinking of mine because there's so many songs. It's easier to think of the songs I wrote than it is everybody else's. But I liked just so many of these songs by everybody. I mean, there were so many that were good songs for the show, but there were many songs that would have been good for anybody to sing anywhere,
Oh
and
yeah.
that was our goal. Our goal was to do songs that, if you didn't know it was a kid's show, you wouldn't say it was for kids, because it was just a good song.
I don't know if this is one that you wrote, but some of my friends from college remembered Just Say Ow.
Yeah, I said Just Say Al. That I did that one. I wrote
Okay,
that.
okay, great. Well, then you'll love this. One time, it was a break from class, and I went to film school here in Nova Scotia. We had like a
Oh,
15.
that's right. You're in Nova Scotia and you're near Halifax, right?
I'm in the suburbs of Halifax. Yep, I'm in
Yeah,
a
yeah,
little
yeah.
community in the suburbs of Halifax.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
I've spent some time up there. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, nice. You'll have to let me know when you're back here next.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know when, but I did spend time there. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great spot. I was just on the waterfront today. But
Yeah,
anyway, when I
yeah.
was in college, I had gotten an email from Noel, and I told my classmates I just got an email from Noel McNeil, and some of them were like, "Cool, who the hell's that?" And I said, "The bear from Bear in the Big Blue
There.
House."
Right, right,
And
right.
one of my classmates, she was talking about how much she loved that show, and she told me I'm allowed to tell this story on the
Okay.
podcast. So
Okay.
but she had told me that she was going to, when she was very young, she was going to get a vaccination. And
Oh,
what comforted her was, I think it was having a Tutter doll, I believe it was.
yeah. A
And
lot of people.
and remembering the song, Just Say Ow. And
That's
instant,
huge. That's
yeah.
exactly why I wrote the song literally for that. Because, the whole thing about when they say things to you like, oh, don't worry, it's not going to hurt. They're
Mhm.
lying, right?
Yeah, it is going to hurt, but it's not going to last long.
Right. And that's why I wrote that song, because I wanted there to be a song for kids so they knew, oh yeah, it's going to hurt, but it's just say I'll say it now and it's over. I mean, just that's why I wrote that song. So the fact that it got used that way is just amazing to me.
Well,
That's so great.
I'll be sure to
Tell
share
her.
this with some of my college
Yeah,
friends.
definitely.
I used it
The body
myself as
show, it's funny. Go ahead. You go ahead.
I was gonna say that I used that song also during when it was time for my age group to get the COVID vaccine. I used
Right.
that, and
Right.
also a skit from Sesame Street where Grover was getting. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but Grover was getting a physical, and
Ah,
the doctor was giving it to him. It's like, okay, I'm gonna look in your ears. I'm gonna check your eyes. I'm gonna test your reflexes. And Grover's walking the viewer through it all, and so he's like, okay, so this is what he's going to do. And now he's going to tell me that I am a healthy little
right.
monster. And the
Right. Right.
doctor
Right.
says, you are indeed a healthy little monster. Now I'm going to give you your booster shot. And now he's a booster shot. I do not want a booster shot, but you just had it. Oh, well,
Oh,
I
that's
felt it for
beautiful.
only just a minute. Could I say a little ow? Well, if that would make you feel better, go ahead. Grover looks at the camera, goes,
Oh, that's
ow.
good.
So
I like that one. Yeah.
so I can tell you that Just Say Ow has definitely had an impact on a lot of people's lives, including my
I
good.
think that's so great. The other thing like that in Bear is the potty show.
I remember
I
that one. Yep.
There's so many times it's been funny where I'll be talking to somebody, in their 20s, 30s, and I'll mention the potty show, and they'll forget for a second that they're an adult, and they'll say, "Oh my God, that's how I learned to," and then they'll stop right there because it's like that's how they learned, and it's slightly embarrassing, but the show is really good for all that.
I was thinking about this morning while I was on my morning walk, but I felt like Bear was a lot like a puppet version of Mister Rogers.
Absolutely, absolutely. That was the idea to some degree. Just he's different, but he's the big idea was to be a protector of children,
Mm-hmm.
because Barney, Big Bird, Elmo, those are all infantilized characters that made to be little children, and you're supposed to empathize with them because they're small and all that stuff. But Mr. Rogers was an adult.
Mm-hmm.
His importance was that he was a protective adult, and Bear's the same way. Bear is a protector of children, and they just don't
Absolutely.
know. And my joke used to be, if you were in a fight, who would you want on your side? Barney, Big Bird, Elmo, or Bear?
Well, all you listeners can comment below for your answer. Talking about Barney, Big Bird, and Bear, you also were involved in the We Are Family video.
Yeah, yeah, that
Mhm.
was great. Love
Yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah,
was amazing. That would never happen again. It was so unusual. Chris Surf and Nile Rodgers and I pulled together. I mean, there were then dozens more people after that, but the initial effort was between the three of us, and eventually Rick Fernandez was involved. So many other people were involved, but the impulse, we just called each other up, or I called, I guess, Chris first, and then Chris brought in Niall, and they were able to get every network to stop for a second and play that video. Did you know that?
I did not know.
When it first happened, because 9/11 had just happened, and I did a 9/11 episode on Bear, even
Oh,
for a little.
wow.
Yeah, it's the one that was about the library, a tree falling in the library. We don't talk about 9/11 per se, but the fire truck is there, and we talk about what
Yeah,
happened.
because as you were saying the 9/11 episode, I was like, when was there a 9/11 episode, and what would
Yeah,
the connection be? That makes sense. Because I remember, do you know a writer named John Weidman?
yeah, John Weidman, of course. Yeah,
Yeah,
what
he
about
yeah he wrote an episode of Sesame Street where there was a fire at Hooper's store. That was in response to
the
9/11.
same thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, John Weidman's a really good example of a writer in New York. Like when I was mentioning writing, you could write for Saturday Night Live, Broadway, or Sesame Street, or Nickelodeon. He wrote Broadway. He was
Oh,
a
yeah.
Broadway, and he wrote a lot of the National Lampoon stuff I did too.
Hmm.
Yeah, Weidman is brilliant. But yeah,
Amazingly.
we did those episodes. So, when we got to, so the idea was, could we get all the characters together just to show kids that people are together? Because it was very traumatic, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
And, and we did that. But then what they were able to do that went so much further is that they got every network, and almost every network kid's character at one point, to agree to run the video at the same time on the same day and to be in it. And they crossed every line of every network and every, cable company. And it was amazing. I don't think it could ever happen again, but it was amazing.
It absolutely was. Yeah. Like, because I remember seeing Fairly Odd Parents.
Yeah.
I think SpongeBob was in it.
They upped it. Well, see, that was way after, but they updated it a
Hmm.
couple of times where they kept putting characters in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. When the beginning, it was just the shows that were on at that time, and then they added more. There weren't that many cartoons in the original song.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you're a very talented voice artist.
thank you.
Really good. You did a very good Grover there.
Thanks. I've recently actually been putting my name in to audition for
Oh,
voiceover
good.
stuff. So
Oh, good.
hopefully stuff comes out of that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you're good.
Thank you. So earlier you were talking about doing Adventures of Elmo and Grouchland, the Sesame Street film, and I'm just gonna say
Right.
this: that is such a cute movie. I did not see it in the theater because I was like a couple of months old at that time.
Yeah.
But I really do love it, and it's kind of interesting because we get to see a lot of the Grouches that Oscar's friends with on the show regularly. Like you've got Grungetta, you've got Osvaldo.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that came later. Yeah.
Yeah. So did you like come up with the idea for Elmo and
I did.
Grouchland? Okay.
That was my idea, and I was very proud of it because I was not a writer on Sesame Street,
Okay.
uh, but I knew all the writers, and Henson was producing that movie at the time, and they knew me before Bear even,
Hmm.
and they asked me. Alex Rockwell is the executive who I still work with a lot.
Hmm.
They asked me to pitch with these five other people that were pitching.
Hmm.
By pitching, I mean come up with ideas for it, right?
Yep.
And so I was competing with all the best Sesame Street writers, and I came up with the idea that got picked up, and so I felt very proud of that. And the idea was really just to do Oscar, this sort of Elmo and Grouchland. I mean, it was just that was the idea from the beginning,
Hmm.
and I didn't really want a bad guy. Like the Mandy Patinkin character wasn't something I thought they needed. I don't think you always need a bad guy in kids movies, little kids movies.
Right.
And I think he did scare the crap out of a lot of people. Little kids like
Yeah,
my.
one of my friends was saying that she was worried that Huxley would steal her blanket.
Yeah, I thought whatever. Anyway, so but it is the first movie that a lot of kids see. It's their first movie a lot of times.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny you mentioned Mandy Patinkin. He's actually coming to Halifax doing Broadway shows or songs,
Oh,
rather. Yeah.
okay.
Mm-hmm. Did you were you on the set for that movie at all?
Only twice. I wasn't there all the time. I wasn't a director. Gary Halverson was a director, so I was just there, sort of to check it out at that time. I wasn't doing anything that they needed. They'd already rewritten it. I wrote it like 6 times, and then they took it away and they gave it back to me. It was one of those Hollywood things where.
Okay, because I saw that you and Joey Mazzarino got
Yeah,
credited for it.
Joey came in after me and added a whole bunch of jokes and stuff. So I love Joey. I think he's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for anybody who doesn't know, Joey was a puppeteer and writer for Sesame Street. He did, and he's been mentioned on this show before. He was also head writer following our good friend Lou Berger, and Joey did Murray Monster, Stinky the Stinkweed, Papa Bear, Horatio, Mary Monster, a bunch of others.
Well, he did in the pilot for Bear. He was one of the 2 otters.
Really?
Yeah, before Peter.
Okay. Lou Berger, I don't know if you know Lou, but he told me that he actually was asked to rewrite Elmo and Grouchland.
Oh, I'm not surprised. They took it to everybody. They took it to 6 other people. While they literally took my disc with my script on it and gave it to somebody without telling me.
Oh, wow.
All sorts of Hollywood things on that. Yeah.
Well, I asked Lou because he was the head writer at that time. I asked him, were you at all involved in the film? Because I think Joey Mazzarino was going to be writing a Sesame Street movie at one point while he was the head writer. So I thought, I wonder if Lou, being the head writer, had any involvement in Elmo and Grouchland. So I asked him, and he said he was asked to be involved in it, but he was busy head writing.
Yeah, and there were a lot of teams trying to crack that story, at the time. Mm-hmm. And luckily, I was able to get them something that worked.
Well, have you ever watched it?
Yeah, Elmo and Grouchland. I went to the premiere with my son, and he was terrified.
Well, the reason I ask is because I'm wondering if throughout the rewrites, if you saw anything that was oh, that's something that was just added in there.
Oh yeah, I saw tons of stuff. I mean, my opening was better than what they ended up doing, but my opening was that kind of meta opening of Bert and Ernie talking to camera.
Okay, so the idea to have Bert and Ernie hosting was always there.
Yeah, they weren't. I didn't have them as that they were hosts. I made it more spontaneous. I don't remember how it was finally done, but it was essentially the same contours of what I wrote. And in fact, this is a classic Hollywood thing where I wrote the first draft. I wrote the first 3 drafts. Okay. Hollywood's famous for people writing the script over and over and over and over again. I wrote it 3 times. Then they took it away and they gave it to 4 other people at 1, 2, 3, 4 people rewrote it. Then they brought it back to me and said, they don't like all the new stuff. They like my version better. Could I put my stuff back in? So I rewrote it, putting my stuff back in. And then while I was doing that, without telling me, they gave it to Joey. But of course, because Joey and I are friends, we talked to each other and said, "Oh, you're working on this." So it wasn't a surprise.
Okay.
But that's the typical way they operate in movie making.
Now, did you ever audition to write for Sesame Street?
I did, and I failed. Norman Stiles did not pick me up. He
okay.
I don't know what he decided. I failed. I failed before I wrote that's why it was so cool to be competing with the writers for the movie and getting the movie, because I had failed. They had the job. I didn't, so it was funny.
That sounds like Norman. I know that Norman Norman and I are good friends. I know that he definitely takes it very, very seriously.
Well, here's the thing. I actually learned, and he knows I say this, he's surprised that I say this because most writers just are bitter afterwards. But I actually learned a lot auditioning for Sesame Street.
Mm-hmm.
I started to understand, either because I studied it or because Norman talked about it. I think I know I've credited Norman before, that I learned more auditioning and failing at Sesame Street than probably I would have if I wrote for them. And I took those lessons. And when I did Ren and Stimpy, Rugrats, and Doug at Nick, I applied a lot of those lessons in a different way at in my other work. And they were really good writing lessons. I learned a lot from Norman, even though I didn't get hired.
Yeah, Norman's great.
Yeah.
He's a brilliant writer.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But
So
you have all inside connections, don't you?
pretty much, yeah. I mean, like through Norman, this always makes me laugh. Through Norman, he asked me, "Have you ever talked to Lou Berger?" And I was like, "I'd love to." And he said, "I'll send you his contact information." So I've had Lou on my podcast twice.
Oh, wow.
Hmm. Yeah, I just did a retrospective with Lou and also with Marty Robinson.
Oh, yeah.
On
Marty, great.
Yeah, we did a whole retrospective on Sesame Street's "Slimy to the Moon" episodes. I don't
Oh,
know if you know about those.
I can imagine. But Marty, I had another pilot at the same time I had Bear for a alien game show. And Marty was the alien. We did a pilot, and Marty was the alien. So I worked with Marty on that. It was a good show.
That's funny because he's one of the Martians.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, he does everything.
Yeah, he really does. Talking about a lot of the legendary Sesame Street Muppet performers, this coming Monday, if he was still alive, would have been the birthday of probably the Muppet guy for a lot of people, the classic Muppet guy, the one and only Jerry Nelson.
Yeah, I knew Jerry.
Okay, what was he like?
He was just a great guy, period.
Okay.
I actually did a very weird project with him.
Mm-hmm.
It was a radio play with country western songs, and he was in it. But he was just one of those really great, talented, knowledgeable, friendly people. He was just a really decent guy.
Mm. Have you ever heard his album of music?
No, I probably should.
Okay, it's called Churro Daydreams. You could probably find it on
Okay.
like Apple Music, Spotify,
Yeah,
YouTube.
somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, I have it on my phone, so
Oh, cool.
it's a great album. And like as you said, he's you were talking about him being in a country band, so that's kind of what I thought of there. And of course, him on the Muppet Show doing all those country songs.
Oh, yeah, he was really amazing. There were a lot of the earlier. We were fortunate to have Dave. What's his name? Stoltz? Dave? No,
Goals.
Goals. Dave Goals was on a Bear episode playing a hound dog.
Mm-hmm.
The Christmas special, he did 2 episodes with us. And that dog, he just did an amazing job with it.
Mm-hmm. And Dave also was on Elmo and Grouchland, one of the few times he ever did Sesame Street stuff as the humongous chicken.
Right.
Yeah, that's the. Was that your idea as well? To have a
Probably not.
chicken?
Chickens are Joey's specialty.
Of course.
I would guess that the chicken. I think Joey gets paid a lot of money to put the chicken jokes in. That's what I would say.
That's funny. So moving on from the Muppets, as I said in the intro, you also created Book of Pooh, which I'm a big Disney kid. Like I grew up with Winnie the Pooh. Book of Pooh was my era.
Cool.
How did all of that happen?
Well, that's another similar thing to the movie writing thing. That it was another situation where Disney asked 5 people to compete for a new version of Winnie the Pooh, a 3D version, and so I actually love these competitions for some reason. I find them fun, and I do shows all the time, but I love it when there's some kind of competition for some reason. And so I came up with the idea, and the logic was that Winnie the Pooh should exist in the world, right? He's a stuffed animal, and that the cartoon on Disney is the cartoon of Winnie the Pooh. The real Winnie the Pooh is the stuffed animal, and the cartoon is a version of him. And so there was a kind of puppetry called Boon Raku.
Yep.
That they didn't use really very much, a 300-year-old form of puppetry. So we built a Boon Raku Pooh, And then I had the idea, because at the time, video games were not that big and there weren't that many virtual sets and none of that stuff was a big deal. But on TV news, they ran, the news was starting to have all these green screen areas on the set. And it was kind of a revelation that some of these sets that the news was happening in were not real sets. They were just green screen, right? We didn't know that in those days.
Mhm.
So when I found that out, I decided to try to see if I could combine virtual sets with the puppet. And there's a really, it's still going on a little bit, but there was an old Italian puppet called Topo Gigio that people don't know much anymore. But Topo Gigio was a mouse. He was only about this big, and he was against black on the Ed Sullivan show, this ancient show. And the people that performed him were in black.
Mhm.
And so it was, they call it Czech black theater. It's from Czechoslovakia. It's bunraku with people in black against a black backdrop and a lot of light on the character. And so the result, it looks like he's walking around. It looks like magic, and that's what I wanted to do. But I did it with sort of low tech of bunraku and the high tech of chroma key and virtual sets and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So
So when
pretty
you
cool.
say that they were looking for a 3D Winnie the Pooh, they were looking for like a computer animated version of that
No,
show?
no, they didn't uh, stipulate it had to be computer. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know if anybody at that time you couldn't do a 3D Winnie the Pooh.
Hmm.
We actually did a test for a 3D Winnie the Pooh uh, when we were working on the set after we started the show for ourselves because we thought we might be able to do it in 3D. But at that time, it was very hard to do a puppet like that on any kind of, or the character like that on any kind of budget for TV. It wasn't, there was Pixar, but there wasn't an easy way to do a 3D character. So I don't know what other people did. It'd be really interesting to see what everybody else did. I only knew what I did.
Okay. So with Clarissa and Bear, both of those shows were on sets, like built sets, and for Book of Pooh and of course It's a Big Big World, those were green screen shows.
Yeah, but they were on sets too, in a
Okay.
way. And I don't know if you add clips to your videos, but I could send you some behind the scenes stuff of how it's made.
Okay.
Um,
I add a lot of pictures.
okay, if you want them, I have a bunch of things you can add into this, clip into this. So basically, we built a in Winnie the Pooh, we built a green stage. In Big Big World, we created a blue stage,
Okay.
but we actually had platforms and we actually had physical pieces. My big thing was to integrate both real and virtual.
Okay.
And so so like some of the honey pots are real, some of them aren't. You
Hmm.
know, some of the pieces of the furniture in Pooh's house are real, some of them are not.
Hmm.
Um, and it was a more mobile kind of thing. You were always trying to put it together with what parts you needed and everything. But we could take a picture back then, even, which is ancient history, but we could take a picture. Let's say Winnie the Pooh had a bunch of balloons. We could take a picture of those balloons and it could be on the set as a digital version too. So we had really developed it a lot, and Big Big World even more so. And then there was a demo I did for a feature film that was just awesome. It didn't get picked up, but it's called Sizzling Kung Fu Mice, where we did a similar kind of thing. It was took place in a Chinese restaurant, and pieces were virtual and pieces were real. It was a fun way to work.
Awesome. So how did It's a Big Big World come about?
Well, I think every show I ever did was because I was desperate. And so um because I know Bear was like, I was desperate for another show, and I thought, well, what if there was a bear who did the cha 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 and sniffed the camera, and that became the idea. And then on Pooh, I was in that competition, and then Big Big World, Bear, they stopped Bear, which was just ridiculous. I don't know why they stopped it. and I want to do a new one. And I just love that kind of character, that big character. And so I worked with the same designer. Um, and we created a dancing sloth.
Okay.
Also did what it didn't get picked up. I'm as interested in the things that didn't happen as the ones that did.
Mm-hmm.
With Tyler Bunch, who played Trilo and 1,000 other characters.
Yep, a good friend of mine.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. You're well connected. Um, Tyler, I had designed a lion for Tyler for a sitcom
Oh wow.
at ABC. It was called Pride of the Family. And Kurt, you must know him too, Kurt Thatcher.
Yep.
And I wrote this pilot called Pride of the Family. It was about a guy, a very straight-laced guy who inherits from his Indiana Jones kind of father a trunk. And when he opens the trunk, there's a lion inside. And the lion was played by Tyler.
Mm-hmm.
And Tyler had this joke he did all the time on set. Puppeteers, if you've been on set with them, you probably have. Puppeteers are some of the funniest people when the camera's off.
Oh,
They're funny,
absolutely. Yeah.
funny when the camera's on too, but they're
I,
very
I
funny.
was a puppeteer on a show once, and I didn't
Okay,
have any
excuse me.
lines, but I screwed around with the director. I was playing a beaver. The director's like, lunch in 5 minutes. I was like, I don't need lunch. I live in the woods. This is my
Yeah,
lunch.
yeah, yeah. So you see, the people have fun, and Tyler used to do this ongoing joke. I don't know if you'll get the references, but it was a combination of Robert Goulet, who was a very schmaltzy singer,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
Peter O'Toole, who was a very stiff, English actor.
I could
And
just see
he,
the combination between the two of them.
yeah, and he would start singing, like Robert Goulet if he were Peter O'Toole. And so I thought, well, that's an amazing character. So I designed the lion to be based on Tyler's character, and we built half of the suit. We built most of the suit, but it didn't happen.
Okay.
No, some of the shows that didn't happen are more brilliant than the ones that did.
Mm. But with It's a Big, Big World, like I watched it here and there a little bit when I was like 7 or 8. One of the things I do remember, I felt like Snook was somewhat like Bear if Bear actually did live in the woods like most bears do. Because like I still remember the first time I ever did watch it, he's like, "Hello there, I'm Snook, your friendly neighborhood sloth." I hope Peter won't be too mad that I'm imitating him.
Yeah, yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, Peter's a good guy too. He and I are very, very
Yes,
close. Yeah, I
he's
met
one
him.
of the best puppeteers.
I met
Yeah.
him in Los Angeles. I was walking around a convention, and the Muppets were there. None of his characters were there, but I guess he was going to see them. I was like, "That's Peter Linz. He's one of the Muppet guys. He does Harry, which is my favorite character." And
Okay,
so,
cool.
so I introduced myself to him. I was like, and I had emailed him prior to this. I was like, "Excuse me, is your name Peter Linz?" And he said, "Yes, that would be me." And I said, "I'm James Nobes." And he says, "Nice to meet you." And then he's like, "Wait a minute. I know who I'm talking to." He's like, "Wow, the James Nobes from Nova Scotia."
Cool.
So to wrap it up, besides the possible reboot of Clarissa Explains It All, are you working on anything new that you can share with us?
I don't know if there's anything I can share. I mean, I'm working on a lot of stuff. I think a
Okay.
lot of stuff is going to happen. I mean, things like Clarissa and Bear, they can't happen during the strike because the strike is on.
Right. Yeah.
And but there's a good reason for the strike, so I'm all for it.
I
Um,
agree. I totally agree.
and but I live in Portugal, and I have a couple of shows in development here that I'm hopeful
Nice.
on doing. And I'm working on a couple of graphic novels that are going to be done in a new way, a new form. And I don't know. I feel like I've got more work than I've ever had. I have fun.
Hmm.
It's what I do.
Well, that's great. Well, now is the time to, as they say on the Book of Pooh, close the book, which of course is my least
Right.
favorite part of nostalgia talk when it's time to wrap up.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you'd like to say to finish?
Uh-oh. No, just I love that people have such strong feelings for my shows. And I find it true here in Portugal too. They know my shows here too.
So
It's
like
such a
so like when people in Portugal, if they know who you are, they just like tell you, "Oh my God, I love that show."
they say my favorite line, they say they don't just say I love it and they don't just say I remember it. They say, "Oh my God, you made my childhood."
Now that's always nice to hear.
Yeah, it's
That is
amazing.
such a nice thing to hear, from any creator. Like I recently interviewed a fellow by the name of Sean Cunningham, who's a Nickelodeon producer and writer and somebody who I'm still good friends with too. And he produced one of the Nickelodeon sitcoms that actually inspired me to want to get into filmmaking.
Which one was that?
I don't know if you'd be familiar with it, but it's called The Thundermans.
No, I missed that one.
Okay, it
And
was on when I was a teenager, and I was watching all of these Nickelodeon sitcoms that I had never seen or heard of before. And it was during my trip to LA, actually, and it was new episode night. And I'm watching all these new shows. I'm like, these are funny. So I come home to Nova Scotia, taped a few of them, and I watched them for the over the next few weeks. And I was like, I want to write a show like this. This is the kind of thing I want to come up with. So,
yeah.
mm-hmm. So Mitchell, thank you again for joining me for Nostalgia Talk.
Yeah. Thanks a lot
And
for
to all
having
you
me.
listeners,
Yeah.
from here among the best of friends, where the story never ends, back in the 100-Acre Woods, in the Book
Here,
of Pooh,
Book of Pooh. Yeah.
and here on Nostalgia Talk. I will see you guys next time. Peace.
Okay. See ya. Bye.